Do you want to learn about the pace rigs that I use to catch loads of carp and win loads of matches? This is going to be the video where we delve deep into my pace rigs. They're really simple, they're really effective, and you're going to want to find out all the information. Okay, so I had full intention of doing this outside in the garden, but I'm absolutely dripping wet. It's scorching outside. High 20s, maybe even 30 degrees today, red hot. The camera started overheating. It's just too hot out there to do any sort of filming, so I thought, do you know what? Let's just do it in the kitchen. Not ideal, but at least you'll get the information. So without further ado, let's have a look at these pace rigs. Now there's a few things that I want to show you. These rigs are really simple, incredibly simple, but there's little details that I've sort of learned over the years that make a big difference when you're pace fishing, and I wanted to share that with you. I've seen comments when we've put bite footage on Instagram, for instance, where I've got a load of line laid on the surface and people are like, oh, this looks horrific. But it's for a reason. It's not just because I'm being a bit slack, which I know is unbelievable because I am a bit slack, but it is actually for a reason. So I thought, if we go into the actual like proper detail about my rigs and each little component and each little reason why I do things, then at least then we can sort of have a proper look and you can understand a bit more about these simple rigs that catch me loads and loads of fish. So the floats themselves are the JC Pace. They're what we use. That's what I've used. I designed them obviously, and we've had them at Nufish for, they've been out for a few months now. Now the JC Margin has been an incredibly popular float. The Margin Paste, it's sold out everywhere across the country, and by the time you're watching this, we're expecting delivery, so this should be back in the tackle shops any day. One size, it's all you need, the little one size. They've got that thin bristle, and it makes such a difference. When you're fishing in the margins, you've all seen me do it on our live match videos. I'm fishing away in the margins, you get loads of fish there, and this float allows you to fish the soft paste effectively. My float will be up and down, it'll even go under with line bites and stuff, but because there's no resistance, the float just pops up and your hook bait stays on. It is I know it's a margin float, but this float is a massive edge, excuse the pun. It really is, and I mean that genuinely. It's not just me trying to sell floats. Enough of you have tried them now to realise the difference that it makes. I just love them, and I'm so pleased we did it, because when me and Mick looked at this float in the when we were designing it, obviously I've been using this pattern for years. When I actually showed him it, he was like, I don't know if we can sell that because it looks so unorthodox, and I'm glad we went with it because it has been a big success story, and everyone who's bought one seems to like them as well. So I believe they make a big difference. Well, I know they make a big difference, and I'm glad that a few of you have actually gone out and bought them and tried them, and the actual numbers that we've sold has really surprised us, which is great. So that's the first float, and then we've got the standard JC Pace, which again are more of a traditional sort of pace float. It's very long, you've got a long thicker bristle, but there are key points on this float that make it a little bit different to the crowd. Firstly, I went with a really slim body. I just think that works when you're pace fishing. Your bait's not really in the water that long. You don't need like a big round body or anything like that. I just think a nice slim float works well. Buoyancy is your enemy, I believe, in pace fishing. It works to hook out of the float, and I wanted to remove as much buoyancy out of the tip as we could, along the lines of the margin float principle, where there's no buoyancy at all because it's so thin. We've actually put the glass all the way to the very tip of the float, so there's no air trapped in that hollow bristle, so you can still see it, and you get a similar effect to this thin bristle. Of course, I would love to sell that pace float with that thin bristle, but obviously you've got to still be able to see it if you're fishing it at longer distances, and that might not be possible if you have that out there. So we still had to think of you guys and think of my eyesight and stuff, so we went with this, and it's got that stem right to the tip. Really important factor. It's an inline body, so your line actually passes through the body, is secured in position with that bit of rubber, and then you put your silicone on the float as normal. So simple float, available in two sizes, and I'll explain to you in a minute how I set each size up for the fishing that we're going to do. So that's the floats covered. Those two patterns cover all my pace fishing. Fantastic. Now let's get into a few of the little details around the kit as well. Firstly, the actual pace pots. Now I use these, they're like an Easter egg edition, Kinder Egg, and I think they're perfect. Like, there's nothing wrong with all the pace pots that you get on the market now, but for me they're a bit heavy, and I'm just one of those, I like to use the lightest pot I can get away with, and there's nothing lighter than one of them. Yes, they're a bit bright and they're a bit ugly, but I just think they work, and they allow me to put a proper dollop of bait in. Like, I can fill it almost 2/3 with hemp, and it's almost like I'm big potting. And when they're in the margins late on and they're absolutely gagging for it, been super aggressive, just works so well. And I put a few little holes in the bottom of the pot. In fact, I put a big one right in the middle, and then 4 or 5 little holes around it as well, and that just allows the water to drain out and also stops the vacuum from being created. When you're turning the paste over, sometimes it can get stuck in the pot if you don't have any holes in the bottom, and I've just found that that works really well. So those two, fantastic. Line choice. You want strong, durable line, and a lot of people seem to be surprised that I go for detection. I know it's obviously our line, but anyone who's used it will know how durable and like abrasion resistant it is. And I was using 020 normal sort of rig line, and I would probably get broke one to match, and I just thought, why am I messing about? And I started using this earlier this year, and I, touch wood, have not been broken a single time. It's so strong. I'm even using the same rig multiple sessions. I can't fault it, I really can't, and I actually wish we could do it in clear as a rig line, because I think it'd be a fantastic rig line. It's so supple. If you actually hold 020 detection up against, say, 019 power line or Supernatural, which I've been using lately, this is more supple. So if you can get your head around the dark colour of it, it actually behaves really naturally in water. So it's a great line. I use it and I fish straight through to the hook. The reason I fish straight through is when you're fishing with 020 or 022, the loops and the little tags off your loops when you're fishing a loop-to-loop hook length are quite stiff, and even if you trim them right down to the knot, they leave a little barb. And when you're loading the pot up on your pole, when you've got this and you're putting your paste in it, you get that loop of line. I just had sometimes when the float would go around it and the line would get stuck around those barbs on the loop to loop. So when you were potting in, it'd get in a tangle, and I just feel like it's just one extra thing to tangle. Obviously it's stronger to fish straight through. It's less convenient because obviously you haven't got hook lengths to change your hooks, but to be honest, with the hooks I'll use, which I'll tell you about in a moment, I don't think it's a massive deal. I tend to not blunt, and I don't ever get broke, so I just fish straight through, and I prefer the strength of it and the fact that I don't get any tangles from that loop to loop. And it might only happen once in a match, but that is enough to do my head in. Onto the hooks. I use a Guru pellet waggler in a size 10. Well, it's super pellet waggler actually, just to clear that up. It's a really wide hook, which is exactly what I want. It's an eyed hook. I'll show you how I tie that on when we look at the details in a moment. But for me, a 10 or a 12 in one of these is a lovely hook. It's very strong, it's very sharp. It's just a good hook pattern, and I really like it, I really rate it.
Now I just want to take a moment of your time to ask you to subscribe to my channel. Now I'm one of the few anglers now that keeps their content entirely free, and I think it's not a lot to ask for you to just press that subscribe button, hit the bell notification, then you'll never miss another video. We get loads of great comments, we get loads of good videos on here for you, and it's totally free. So if you could do me a favour, press that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I greatly appreciate it.
Can't fault these hooks at all. In fact, I've caught thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on them now, and I can't fault them for paste fishing. In fact, I can't see me changing anytime soon. They're strong, they do exactly what I need, brilliant hooks. Now I can hear you all thinking, why are you using a spade end hook when you're pole fishing? Now, because I'm using a thicker line, I actually quite like an eyed hook. And rather than tie it on with a Palomar or a Grinner or a blood knot or anything like that, which I actually think looks a bit crap when you're fishing pole style, I actually tie it on like a spade knot, like a spade end hook. And I'm going to show you how to do it. There's a technical term for it. I think it might be called a Snell knot or something like that, but I am not a hook snob or a knot snob, and I don't know what it's called, and it's probably wrong how I'm tying it, but it works. I've never had it let me down, and I'm going to show you how I do it. Okay, so how do we do the knot? Firstly, obviously we need to get some line, and we need to get our hook. Now, I'm tying this on in a spade end fashion. So firstly, we need to put this on get some weight really. When I'm tying rigs at home, I actually put it in between my knees, but I haven't got that luxury because I'm trying to do it on a table to show you guys how it works. Right, moving on to the knot. Firstly, let's pass that line through the eye of the hook. Hopefully you can see that. And then pull about 5 inches through, 6 inches through. Now we're going to double the line back on ourselves, like so. So we've passed that through, we've got the loop formed, so we've gone through the eye, looped it, and then back up. Hopefully you can see that. Now I'm going to start whipping the tag end, which is here. I'm going to whip that around the shank, and I go up. I go from the the bottom of the hook up to the eye. Now, Nathan Watson always says I do this wrong, and he's probably right, but it's never let me down in all the time I've been doing it, so I'm going to continue to do it how I think it is done. And I ended up getting about a dozen or 15 wraps until I get up to the eye. So we've got that loop, and then we've whipped up the shank until we've got to the eye, and then it's perfectly there, ready to go. So next thing, I need to pinch the line around the eye like so. So we've got the loop, we've got the line, which is now whipped around the shank, and then we've got this loose tag. This is going to go back through the loop, like so. And then I'm going to pull the main line. I don't pull the tag, I pull the main line that way with my fingers. You can see it, I'm like pinching the line almost with the back of my hand, I suppose, and I'm just teasing it with my fingers. It's very difficult to do this on camera, I've got to say. It sounded easy in my head. And then there you go. So we've got the knot, like so. I then pull this tag to tighten everything up, and there we go. Nicely tied, it's really strong, and there we go. So I've trimmed that off. I like to leave a tag of about 10 mil, and as you can see, we've got, so there you go. That's the hook finished. We've gone straight into the eye, made that loop, whipped around, all the way up to the eye, passed the tag back through the loop, pulled it down, and away you go. Trimmed it off at about 10 mil. And that, for me, is the strongest way to do it. It is brilliant, it never lets you down, and I just think it sits way better than any, like, Palomar knot or Grinner knot or blood knot, or however traditional way you would tie an eye hook on. I think that is just a better, more secure way. And I think that's it for the little details. Oh, on the elastic, I always use pink zip. Now I just, obviously that depends on your venues, but around here, I'm generally fishing for bigger carp. So pink zip is perfect for those 3 to 10 pound carp that I'm fishing for. And it does the job, it gets them under control. What I like about it, strike into them, I don't, because I'm generally fishing a top kit and one, or a top kit and half a section, like a short free. I just hook them, put the pole down, and they go off. But it's not too aggressive that the hook pulls out. It just lets them swim off, they come back, and I can net them quickly and get them under control. So it's a lovely elastic. So I think we'll start with the margin. As you can see, they've got a couple of them on the winder, and it's really simple stuff, like incredibly simple stuff. It is literally a hook on the end, the float on the line, that is it. It is as simple as that. Now I fish this float between the shallowest water I can get in, which would be generally where I fish 12 inches, right up to sort of 3 foot is probably my limit with this float, and it works brilliantly in those depths. So we've got, say I've got, let's set this to 18 inches, which is how I caught last week. So we've got the hook in this hand, we've got the float, and then nothing at all below it. Up that sort of 18 inches of depth, then we've got the float in position. So the float, it comes as you buy it with a little tiny black sleeve above that. I actually glue mine in position. I just put a little dab of super glue on there to stop it moving, and I just do it where the paint stops. That seems to be about the right bristle length. You don't have to do that, I just like to. So I just put a little dab of glue on that. I then put the line through the body of the float, and then the float comes with another rubber then below it. I put the line through that, push it into position like that, and then I put 2 more or even 3 more pieces of silicone below that on the stem, and that is it. Now I plumb up so that I'm about in between the middle and bottom rubber. So I've got my plummet line about there. So I'm about 2 inches over depth. I am not fussy one bit. In fact, I like the float to sit like that when I'm fishing. I don't want it straight up. It just helps me delay the strike, and that is a key detail that a lot of people miss. If you have it like that, obviously it's great, and there will be spells in your match where it'll just wallop under. But sometimes when you've caught a few, they get a bit funny in the margin. They can be in there, you get lots of indications, lots of movements, and you get just too much going on, and you end up striking at stuff that you don't need to be. So I'll often fish it, and the float will be set like that in the water on the wonk. I've got loads of footage of it happening, and it'll just go like this as the fish are sort of bumping into the line, and then eventually it'll stand up and just wallop under, and it is deadly. It's unbelievably deadly, in fact. And that is as simple as the margin rig needs to be. Now, one detail that someone picked up on Instagram and was like, hey, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's got too long a line. I actually have about, again, the same distance above the pole float as what I do below it. So it'll be 18 inches-ish, maybe a touch less, 15 inches. The reason I do that, again, is the resistance theory. If I'm tight to my float all the time, when I'm getting all these liners, the fish can feel it, I'm convinced of it, they feel the pole tip. I actually want all this slack sort of laid on the surface, relaxed, and every time that float goes under a liner, there's nothing, there's no resistance. And eventually the float will wallop under and you hit the bite anyway. I don't need to be lifting into the bites, I'm striking properly because I'm paste fishing, I need to set that hook through the paste. So actually having a longer line, even though the float might, I keep hooking my leg, even though the float might skim around a little bit because it's over depth and it's just sat on the wonk like that, don't worry about it. That longer line, trust me, allows the rig to behave in a relaxed manner, and when they take it, you won't miss the bite. So you don't need a little short line. It works better with a longer line. Trust me, I've tried it again and again and again because I always thought if I use a little diddy line like that, they'll hook themselves because they take the bait so confidently, and they just don't. So there's no point, you might as well fish. It works in a number of ways. Obviously it allows the rig to behave naturally, but it also means you can put your pole out of the way and lay it on the grass and just let the rig fish. So your pole's completely out of the way. There's no shot down the line spooking the fish. Your pole's out of the way. Everything's as stealthy as possible. A brilliant way to fish, and I think people miss that because we're so we fish so precise these days with pellets and baits like that, and that is the correct way to fish those baits, that we've kind of forgot about some like our natural background where you give the fish a bit of rope to take the bait. And I think paste fishing is very much one of those baits where you've got to give them a bit of slack to take the bait, and I think having that slack above it is just as important as the float. And it looks awful, I appreciate that, but it works. So that's the margin rig, as simple as that. And like I say, it's a simple setup, but there are some key details. Next rig is the 0.3. Now this is, I've got to be honest, I think I've gone on record quite a few times and said I don't like fishing paste in depths over 5 foot. However, loads of you have since gone on to message me saying, well, most of my lakes are a bit deeper than that. For that reason, I don't use the 0.5 a hell of a lot. I use the 0.3 for pretty much anything between 3 foot and 5 foot. I use this float, and it's the one I use the most out of the 2 bigger sizes. So I'll just quickly show you how, and to be fair, I actually fished the 2 in a different way. Now this is the 0.3 setup, and as you can see, I used this just the other day. I actually won last time out, which was nice. Again, fishing straight through, and this was set at 42 inches deep, this rig, so hopefully you can see that. Now I think it's very important to show you the setup from the top down, I think, because this is a little bit different because you're dealing with tow and stuff like that. So when I'm fishing the 0.3, they've got aerators on it at Shearsby, and you often get a tow around the edge of the lake because it's a bit of like a swimming bath kind of setup. The water goes around the edge like that, and you've got to like present your bait. And what I do, I actually, after using the slack on the margin rig, because I don't have to worry about the tow so much there, I can just put my bait in and leave it. Whereas here, I'm actually having to present the bait properly. So I actually do use a short line in this instance, just so I can hang on to my float a little bit. So I use, obviously it depends on the weather, but between 6 and 10 inches of line above the float. As you can see there, I've got 4 back shot above it, about halfway. Now they're 4 number 8, so a heavy back shot. This just allows me to hang on to that float. The float again is a 0.3, and just as before, we go through the body with the line, through the supplied bit of silicone, and then into position with the other 2 rubbers. So nothing out of the ordinary there. And then this rig is a little bit different because I do actually have some shot on it. So hopefully you can see that. I've got 2, that's all, below it, and they're 2 number 8s, which just takes some buoyancy out of the float. 0.3 with no shot down the line is just a little bit bulky, really. I still don't like having anything really interfering. Them hooks are still so sharp, they keep getting me in my leg. I don't like having anything below it to interfere with the hook bait, but I do need some shot here just to take some buoyancy out of that float. And I use 2 number 8s. Now this serves 2 purposes. I've got one about 3 inches below the float, and then I've got one 6 inches below that. And it just works really well. And I'll tell you what happens, when I load my pot up, if I don't have them shot there, and I have them directly under the float becomes heavy then, and it wants to tangle itself up when you're shipping it out. Whereas I found that having them, there's a bit of a kink in the line, so ignore that, but having that like that, with that little stagger, when I load my paste onto the hook and then put it in my pole pot, I get this sort of U, and them shot keep it like that. It sort of weights the float down, so it always sits like that, and then I can ship it out without getting in a tangle. And it looks like a tiny detail, but trust me, when you're fish shipping in and out 100 times in a match, which you can do with paste because you miss bites are just part of the game, you don't want to be getting into tangles every other chuck. And I've just found that simple little shot in works really well. And then, like I say, I've got nothing then below that. It is trying to fish with nothing down the line, but I have to because the float's a little bit bigger and I do need some stability. I've got those 2 shots there, and that is my 0.3 rig, and it never changes. I never move them shot. I never put any down the line. It is that is my rig. Perfect, the 0.3, really simple stuff. Now moving on, we've got the 0.5 now, and this is where things get a little bit different. And I've got to be honest, I don't use this rig a hell of a lot. Like I say, I don't like to fish in depths over 5 foot paste, and so I rarely need this 0.5 float. But if I was going to the glebe and I wanted to fish long on the bottom, say, over loose fed pellets, then I would use this float, maybe makings, venues like that, then I would potentially use this float, just purely because the depth demands it. And I've noticed that a lot of you guys need this bigger float. So ignore, I haven't actually used this rig, so I haven't got my back shot on it, but I would use back shot, but I would have a much longer length of line just to help with pole control. Float again, pass through the body, put the rubbers in place. But the loading is different. I actually do want some weight down the line, because the reason I'm fishing a bigger float is that I'd need some stability because the depth is greater. So maybe it's 7-8 foot. I can't just rely on my bait to free fall down the bottom and just rest on the bottom and just present perfectly. The bait will be fine, but the float will move. It'd just be a nightmare. So I've got a long bit of line, so that's probably 2 foot between the hook, and then I've got a little olivette which I secure in position with a gripper stop, so I can move that if I want to. I actually like it quite far away. I'll move it 2 to 3 foot away depending on the depth. If it was 5 or 6 foot deep, I'd have it 2 foot away. If it was 7-8 foot, I'd probably move it up to 3 foot. Something about halfway down, you know. And I just want some stability down the rig. I don't need it for bite detection, so it might as well be halfway. Now on the line, I've then got a gripper stop, and then I've got an olivette which I've taken the tubing out of, so it can run as free as a bird on the line. And that's really important, because when you're shipping it out, again, we don't want tangles. And what happens with this lovely sliding olivette is when you put your paste in your pot, that olivette will naturally find its own position. So when you're shipping it out, it helps keep that loop of line, what I talked about with the last rig, it keeps it in like that. So, and then when you pop the paste in, the olivette then slides down into position and you fish it as normal. But as soon as you load your paste into the pot, that olivette slides and creates that sort of weight pivot point, or whatever you want to call it, to stop you getting tangles. And that is as simple as it is. Sliding olivette, 0.5 float. And interestingly, because I know you'll ask, what size olivette is it? That's a 0.3 Drennan olivette, a sliding one. You say it's a 0.5 float, but I just want to take some buoyancy out of the float and give myself a little bit of stability. That's all. I don't want to dock my float down or anything with a 0.4 or a 0.5 olivette. I just want some weight down to help me get some stability in the rig. So the 0.3 is perfect. And that is the 3 rigs, so as simple as that. So we've got the margin one with no shot down the line, you've got the 0.3 with those 2 shots staggered just below the stem of the float, and then you've got the 0.5 with that olivette down. And that is as simple as the rigs need to be. It's a brilliant setup, it's very simple, it's very effective, it works, and that is all we want. We just want rigs that work. I've tried and tested these rigs now for, I mean, how long have I been doing this? You've seen me doing live matches for years, but I've been pace fishing since I was a kid because it was the thing to do where I was from. And I just believe that them 3 rigs, if you use them, you're gonna be fine. We're catching loads of fish with them at the moment. You guys are catching loads of fish with them at the moment. And hopefully you're gonna have enjoyed this video enough to press that subscribe button.